Good evening and welcome to the first Issues with Race Debate Tuesdays. Today we're going to have a topic. Our topic is the merits of integration, for and against. Okay, in the pro corner will be Soul Power. And in the con corner will be Phi Queen. This will be a 10-minute debate with opening statements, supporting statements, and closing statements. Okay, I'm off.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good evening, Ms. Fihead and members of Issues with Race. Let me say, as a matter of clarifying, this is not just about the pros and cons of integration. It is about integration versus separation, and one can choose one without the other without being against the other. So let me begin by providing three contextual definitions that I will use to create the framework for my bounded rationale perspective as we proceed through this debate. In this context of this discussion, we define integration as being the complete incorporation of blacks into every aspect of American society. We go on to define separation as the complete detachment of blacks from all aspects of American society, and we define segregation as the forced or voluntary isolation of blacks within American society. Let's be clear, at this point in our history, we are neither fully integrated with nor segregated from white America. We are still in a transition from segregation to integration, and it has only been 50 years in the making. We have not arrived at, nor is there an approaching crossroad where separation is even a viable option. We simply are not at that point in our development as a people where we can make a realistic go at nation here. Look, I hate to be blunt, but until we as black people can learn to control our neighborhoods, we're talking about nationhood. So what's this big ideal about integration, and why is it important? Racial integration is the direct result of black people during the Jim Crow era who had little or no rights, who stood up and demanded equal rights, not just for themselves, but also for you and I. They were the champions of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. You know that career that you love to brag about? They made it possible. They fought for the Voting Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. For all of you who are so proud of your first black president, he couldn't have been there and you couldn't have voted for them without integration. In 1968, they beefed up the Civil Rights Act. And you know that fancy house that your family is living in? That was integration. You see, what some of us don't understand is without integration, this internet would be here today. But black folks, you and I would not. I guarantee it. But we've made progress. There's no doubt about that. Our fight's not over. It is not time for black folks to throw in the towel. Today, when we look around us, we see voluntary diversity becoming the norm. We have black elected officials in all 50 states of the Union. There are black families living wherever their money can buy. I mean, who heard of that when I was a kid? Black citizens work in every level of government and industry. even rogue police departments across America, they are learning as we speak that you can't kill black folks and get away with it. Look, we are in a process. The process is not over. The problem is we need your help. And many of you are not out there. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Assuming I can go now. Can I be heard? Okay, thank you. Good evening, Issues with Race. Good evening, excuse me, to my opponent, Mr. Soul Power. But you led off with 3 words. I'm going to give you 2. One is morale, the other is colonization, which is what black people have suffered at the hands of their white oppressors. So the definition of morale, of or pertaining to or concerned with principles or rules or right conduct, or the definition between right and wrong, ethical or moral attitude, expressing or conveying truths, or counsels as to right conduct, founded on the fundamental principles of right conduct rather than on legalities, enactments, and customs. President Abraham Lincoln, in his June 26, 1957 speech on the Dred Scott decision, I have said that the separation of the races is the only perfect preventive amalgamation. The enterprise is too difficult one, but when there is will, there is way. And with colonization, needs more is a hearty will. The second president to co-sign this was Jefferson. It is morality, correct? We send the slaves out and let them go free. And it is in our self-interest, Lincoln and Jefferson said, to let us brought to believe it is morally right and at the same time favorable to at least not against our interest to transfer the Africans to the native claim. So you have 2 American presidents who are saying that they agree with black people being separate from whites. However, this separation was a trick. It was that they wanted to colonize blacks. They wanted to colonize blacks in a position to where they still own. And this is basically what integration has done. It has colonized black people into believing that we are self-sufficient independently of one another. That's not the case. So we're going to look at the definition for colonization. The definition of colonization: to send a group of settlers or to a place or establish control over it. Come to settle and establish political control over the indigenous people of an area. And that is exactly what has been done to black people. We've been believe that because black people have some degree of education, which this is not the majority, this is the rule is the exception for some black people to have opportunities to education. It is the exception that some black people are able to live in neighborhoods of their choosing. That is not the norm, but it is the norm for white people to live wherever they would like to live because they have not been colonized into urban communities the way black people have been colonized. If you go back to the 1920s, where we have a situation that we like to refer to as Black Wall Street or Little Africa, as some would say, black people had a thriving community. They lived in areas that did successfully better than their white counterparts. And white people didn't like this. They didn't like seeing black people living independent of them. So what did they do? They did the age-old tactic of having a white woman say, a black man raped me. And white people went in and they demolished. Now, some people would like to say that it was a race riot. It's not a riot when you've been overwhelmed, killed, murdered, brutalized, beaten, looted, robbed. And that's where the demise of the black strong economic system fell. So we transfer over into 2015. And you have some blacks who will present the argument that black people really can be anything they want to be. Well, how can you be anything you want to be, Mr. Soul Power, if you've been colonized? Black people are colonized, and it is only until we separate as a people and become dependent of each other, not opposite of each other, not independent of self, but dependent of one another, that black people can strive and move forward. We done it in the 1920s. We can do it in 2015. All we need is tenacity and an opportunity and a set of land that we control, our own police forces, our own schools. Let us educate our own kids. No more do we want to rely on the white man to give us anything. We're not asking for a handout. We built America. If we built America for you, what makes you think we can't build America for ourselves or for our children? Our children thrived better in the 1920s than white kids. So why do we need to continue to depend on white people? We don't. We want to be free. We want to be free and independent of this colonization that we call America in 2015. Okay, that's my time. Thank you, Room. Thank you, Soul Power.
All right, that was a great is that a presentation phase? And now we're going to move forward to the rebuttals. Okay, 10-minute maximum for rebuttals, and I'm going to now call up Brother Soul Power.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As I listen to my opponent, it is self-evident why our people are in dire straits. Black folks, we need all hands on deck. And we certainly have defeated some social injustices, but others persist. I'll admit that. It would be nice to have full participation with every black man, woman, and child on board. But not all of you have stepped up to claim your share of the benefits of integration. Many of my opponents, they are people who have shunned the mainstream black America. They do not accept or respect the leadership that have been chosen by the majority of black people. You see, I too have a dream of black folk becoming independent. But I caution you, a dream unabated by rationale can quickly become a living nightmare. And that's what I'm hearing from Ms. Firehead. A nightmare in the making. Ladies and gentlemen, integration does not work like a light switch. I submit to you that integration is a process, and the process is well on the way. In terms of the separation that my opponent talk about, right now in 2015, black folks are simply not prepared to do anything other than talk about a mythical nation called niggerdom. Where that will be located, I have no idea. But certainly we're not prepared just yet. Integration was never meant to be a quick fix, and nor is it a magic act where failures can certainly reinvent themselves. Integration was designed to be a long-term solution where all the participants have equal opportunity. Some of us haven't given it a chance. Too many black folks have the misconception that in order for integration to work, all black folks must be integrated at the highest levels of society. Nonsense. You simply get in where you fit in. If you have a 9th grade education, then it's kind of silly to expect to be integrated into society as a college professor. And that doesn't matter how many of those $2.99 books you bought from people who are equally academically challenged.